Let's just say, this is hypothetical. If you could load only one old save file, like in a video game, and make new decisions, would that change your life? The answer is no. That route is only possible for those people with choices. For those who never had any choice from the start, this speculation is completely meaningless. Therefore, I have no regrets. Or to be more accurate, just about everything in my life is a regret. Hikigaya Hachiman. Hello, welcome back to C's Story Corner. Time for Book 8 of my youth romantic comedy As Wrong as I Expected. As a reminder, I'm reviewing the book, not the anime. This one was heavy, and terribly sad, and fully frustrating. Why, you ask? It really brings to light just how much of a sacrifice Hachiman has been made into from page 1 of the series. Oh, it's always been alluded to, but in this book it reaches a point you can't ignore. And like with book 1, it gets kicked off with Hirosuke-sensei. It starts off showing just how down Hachiman is. He's so obviously depressed that he gets called out by his sister Komachi, Zaimokuza, and Saiki throughout the book. The first time is Komachi. While they're eating breakfast together, she tries getting Hachiman to open up and talk to her, but the whole thing ends in an argument with him telling her to back off and them not speaking to each other for a week. This comes at a terrible time, as Hachiman's already feeling powerless and isolated, and Komachi is really the only person he's ever been able to rely on, or turn to, and so things just keep going downhill. Tensions between Hachiman, Yukino, and Yui are high. High enough that when Hirosuke-sensei barges into their club, she notices, but does absolutely nothing to help. Instead, she dumps more problems on their lap. Seriously, lady, if you cared about these kids, you wouldn't have brought up why you were there. You would have used your forceful bullying thing to get them to open up and start talking. Even if that didn't work, it would have still been 1,000,000 times better than what she did. And it would have given them some time to work things out, instead of tearing them further apart. Which is totally against her endgame. But that's not the worst of it. This woman brings Megiri, the student council president, and someone new, a two-faced chick named Ishiki Iroha, to the trio to solve a problem that's 1,000,000% the adult's responsibility, and force it into their lap before wiping her hands clean of it. What am I talking about? The student council election. Like I said, Ishiki is two-faced and has made herself enough enemies who hate her deeply enough to go around and nominate her for president for student council, which is something no one at the school cares about. So Ishiki would win in the most embarrassing way possible, a vote of confidence, making the girl lose face. Somehow? Not sure how this would negatively impact her, but I've never been popular, and there could be cultural things going on here I don't understand. This is pointed out as pretty clear bullying in a school that prides itself on being bully-free. Yeah, just like all my schools were. But since no one else is running, it's even more noticeable if Ishiki drops out. On top of bullying from the girls, Ishiki's teacher is also bullying her into running out of some self-important fantasy. But for some unknown reason, instead of Hirosuke-sensei doing her job by both properly dealing with the girl's bullying, then issuing a formal complaint on Ishiki's behalf against the teacher bullying a student, pressuring her into something she doesn't want to do and isn't required to do, she dumps it on the three who have no power in this situation to do anything, all while Hachiman is so obviously struggling emotionally that people, sensei included, easily notice. Though I can't say this isn't like Hirosuke-sensei. She's always quick to dump on Hachiman to get what she wants for other students, but at least before now it's been subtle, and within the realm of something he has anything at all in any way, shape, or form to do with. But this? It just reminded me so starkly of all the horrible teachers and administrators who blamed everything happening on me and told me to figure out what I was doing wrong and change, just because it was an inconvenience for them, you know, to actually do their jobs. Anyway, trying to figure out a task they have no right, authority, or ability to do anything about, Hachiman does what he's become quite comfortable doing. He offers himself up as a sacrificial pawn. This makes Yukino even more upset with him than she already is, but instead of talking or understanding, or even just chewing him out enough, he understands her stance. She rejects him and pushes him out of the club, leaving him to struggle on this task alone, while Yukino and Yui work against him. And all this is thanks to Hirosuke not doing her job. At the same time, all of this is just further making Hachiman's sense of self-worth plummet. Quote, "I'd only grown in the worst ways. I had to laugh at myself." Quote, as an existence less than air, I would just be waiting for time to pass. Quote, I was Hayama's escort, that's it. A side item. Less than pickled vegetables in a boxed lunch. I couldn't even become saran wrap. What's even more heartrending is he's internalizing how little others care about him. Quote, I think the only item that gets treated more carelessly than me are food additives. Quote, even if I was being laughed at, it was fine as long as a mere side item wasn't in the way. If his crumbling relationship with Yukino, losing the service club as a safe place he might belong, having outrageous and totally uncalled for amounts of responsibility dumped on him because of a two-faced jerk who reaped what she sowed, and a teacher who refused to do her job isn't enough. Another weight is hefted onto Hachiman's shoulders. With his relationship with his sister seriously on the rocks, service club attendance now being voluntary, and Yukino pretty much throwing him out of the club, Hachiman wanders to downtown Chiba to waste time so he doesn't have to be at home. While there, he runs into Yukino's sister, Haruno. Though this isn't pleasant, it's not horrible. Or, it's not horrible until a ghost from his past arrives. A rather rude and inconsiderate girl named Orimoto Kaori appears along with a friend. She attended junior high with Hachiman, and they'd interacted enough for him to get the wrong idea and develop a crush on her. When he'd built up the nerve to tell her, his school life went from terrible to unbearable, as she made him the laughingstock of the school. After all this, and being generally rude to Hachiman while talking to him and Haruno, she has the gall to ask him if he knows Hayama, and if he'd introduced the soccer star to her friend. He declines, saying they aren't acquaintances, but Haruno is quick to meddle by calling up Hayama and having him meet them at the coffee shop they were in. The popular king arrives, and Hachiman suffers through the interaction, trying to figure out when he can leave. Long story short, the two girls and Hayama exchange info and set up a date, something Hachiman finds out about at school when Hayama approaches him about it. Of course our protagonist says no to going. He wasn't invited, and he has no intentions of dealing with someone who made him a laughingstock, completely killing what little peace he had in school. But Haruno jumps in and bullies Hachiman into going. Poor Hachiman. And yeah, all this sounds bad. But there's more than surface level as to why. Orimoto was someone Hachiman tried developing a deeper relationship with, and not just failed, but was utterly mocked and humiliated for it. That event crippled him, and now while watching something he cares about fall apart, losing the relationship with Yukino that he desperately wants to deepen, he has to deal with this past issue and face the very real possibility that he'll end up crippled again. Only this time will be different. It'll be worse, more painful, because he actually does care about Yukino and Yui, and he truly feels comfort and some level of belonging in the service club. Still, he goes on the date, and, surprisingly, despite all his agonizing, it's not what he expected. Oh, the two girls mock and tear down Hachiman the entire time, while praising and admiring and fawning over Hayama, and Hayama just smiles and lets them carry on like this for hours. The jerk. But, even before all that started, the date didn't feel anything like he was agonizing over. Quote, seeing the two girls felt kind of strange. If I were to put that feeling into words, it would be like an anticlimactic, this is it? Even if it were merely going through the motions of hanging out with girls, it was still a fairly big event for a teenage boy. That's why it was surprising how off this felt. It hadn't felt this way those times at the beginning of summer and during summer vacation, and I'd warned myself to never, ever get the wrong idea about it. But this time, I wasn't worried about all that. It's like, it's nothing to me, huh? Even though the date is miserable for him, Hachiman knows he's just there to be something mocked and ridiculed, so the girls can fawn over Hayama even more. And since the popular king just goes along with it, Hachiman contents himself with this role. It's not like he's worth anything else, right? Well, that's how it seems until the four decide to grab something to eat. While there, the girls continue tearing down Hachiman until Hayama finally, at the time he planned, tells them off. What time was that? When Yukino and Yui arrived at his invitation. This only makes the atmosphere between our three players all the more tense, and causes the situation to degrade further. But we do see just how much Hayama's noticing Hachiman. After everyone but Hachiman and Hayama leave, the popular king tries talking to our poor loner, and is met with some well-deserved hostility. Then Hayama gets to his point. Quote, you should know what you're really worth. And not just you. The people around you should know too. Quote, You've always done things like this, haven't you? But could you stop? Always sacrificing yourself to make things work." This accusation thoroughly upsets Hachiman, who tells Hayama off and leaves. And the universe, just to rub salt into his many open wounds, knocks over a whole rack of bikes on top of his own. Yeah, poor Hachiman. Still, it doesn't stop his thought or his anger. Quote, "I wouldn't let him call it self-sacrifice. I've maximized efficiency and done the very best I can with the few cards I've drawn. He doesn't get to call that self-sacrifice. That was a humiliation greater than anything, a blasphemy against someone who's lived in desperation, who'd sacrifice themselves for you jerks." At the same time he's raging against this, he also realizes he lost something precious he'd shared with Yukino, making the scene all the more heartbreaking. Now, if you remember some of my early videos, you'll probably be thinking, what's he so upset about? He did sacrifice himself. And you'd be right, he did. But all his sacrificing himself wasn't about self-sacrifice. It was about doing jobs he was forced to do against his will with what little resources he had at his disposal. Then it became about protecting someone important to him. Soon it was just twisted into confronting a problem for everyone else that he was struggling with for a solution. And last, it just cycled back to being something he did to deal with what was forced onto his shoulders. All this, while what few cards he had were being snatched away, and the people he cared about were betraying him. As you can guess, the major theme of Book 8 is sacrifice, as I've given a number of examples already. Near the end, Hachiman is forced to decide if he'll be the sacrifice, the service club, or Ishiki. But he's against the latter two. Quote, "Fundamentally, nobody has the right to sacrifice another to satisfy their own selfish reasons. And this is a noble thought. What right do any of us have to sacrifice someone else? The only problem is, Hachiman has been the sacrifice multiple times from the beginning. Even the student council issue is just Hirosuke-sensei sacrificing the club's well-being by forcing the issue on them and letting it tear them apart before her very eyes. And more specifically, she's sacrificing Hachiman when she manipulates him into confronting Yukino. She knew exactly the kinds of things Hachiman would do, because it's what he's done multiple times, and what he's allowed others to do to him even more. She knew the distress the club was in, and she knew the depression Hachiman was being crushed by, and yet she still chose to sacrifice them so she wouldn't have to do her job. Worse, from Book 1, Hachiman has been the sacrifice for everyone. Hirosuke-sensei sacrifices him for Yukino's sake, though this isn't made super clear until the next book, and again here, so she doesn't have to do jack squat. She's constantly bullying Hachiman without any apparent concern for his well-being or desires, and is always putting more on him than any kid should have to handle, all for her own desires and ends. Yui mocks him and does nothing when he ends up alone from missing so much class due to rescuing her dog. She then continues treating him like crap to maintain her social position, get on good terms with Yukino, and because she's too selfish to say anything about her negligence which nearly killed Hachiman. In the beginning, Yukino is more than happy to degrade and bash him before it grows into a twisted kind of understanding. But even then, she uses him hard by dumping insane amounts of work on him during the cultural festival after bungling the request from Sagami and allowing the nasty girl to nearly ruin everything, instead of standing up and making sure the work is evenly distributed. And why does she do this? As punishment for saving her and the festival. The popular clique is always happy to walk all over him to get what they want, whether it be trivial things like stealing a tennis court from someone they're helping, annoying things like making the class dynamics to the popular people's liking, or cruel things like demanding Hachiman keep their group together, more than once. Even Zaimakuza uses Hachiman for various things, between being an unwilling beta reader and getting to spend extra time with Saika. Though to be fair, this is a mutual thing, so I can't really be upset about this one. But the list goes on if you really want to nitpick. He starts off the easy sacrifice everyone is quick to toss into the fire, so why are they surprised when he starts walking in of his own accord, or when he doesn't bother standing up for himself for accepting he has any value? This isn't his responsibility. Neither should the three of them be forced into a situation where each has to choose whose blood is offered. From the beginning, he's just a joke, and a convenience no one wants and no one cares about. So why should he care about himself now? Quote, "It wasn't like I wanted to put someone in the line of fire. I didn't want someone else to take my position. I mean, it'd be awkward if they were to steal away that spot where I belonged. It was pretty comfortable after all. Sadly, he isn't talking about his spot in the service club. In the end, he gives up his idea for fixing the student council election problem, and goes about it in a very different sort of way. And it allows him to succeed in saving the service club. Except, at the same time, it doesn't. Instead of seeing his attempt at trying something different to save what all three of them didn't want to lose, Yukino chooses to be a butthead, spiraling Hachiman down a pit of self-doubt and worry. Instead of being happy, he found another way, and addressing the core issue of a problem they never should have had to handle. Instead of taking this opportunity to reinforce his willingness to change, something Yukino has mentioned multiple times she wants him to do. She's a total butthead. He's now stressing over whether or not she wanted to actually be student council president, and if he was wrong for trying to save this safe place they were all holding on to. Though, let me say, if she wanted to be president, she should have gotten her butt in gear and signed up before the original deadline. If she needed a crisis to push her towards something when she had absolutely nothing stopping her in the first place, then A, she didn't actually want it, and B, she didn't have enough respect or investment in it to do a decent job. Yes, what they had was strained, and not what they had before. Even what they had originally was a lie, which was not on Hachiman in the least. But it was slowly working its way to being what they actually wanted. Quote, I didn't want some pretense of friendship. I think I wanted something real. And I didn't need anything else. Communicating without a word, understanding without actions, and no matter what happened, it won't break. It was a foolish, but beautiful illusion far removed from reality. She and I both sought something real like that. But even if they both wanted that, Hachiman's the only one actively working for it. Yet he thinks he's the one who's in the wrong. And that's the true tragedy. Quote, right before I left the club room, I turned back, and though it was the same people there, it felt like a completely different place. It didn't smell of tea anymore. Hachiman, despite doing everything he could to save the place he belonged, lost it. Just like he knew would happen. Only, from where I'm sitting, it wasn't his fault on any front. But to him, it is. So, in his eyes, how worthless does that make him? Giving everything, and even changing himself, how he does things, he still failed to protect the one thing that was important to him. And just to add another slap in the face, Yukino sucker punches him by her selfishness, with guilt that isn't his. She won't even acknowledge how hard he worked to do this in a way she'd be happy with. I'm sorry, Hachiman, but you need to seriously focus on some self-care before you completely break. Maybe take some time and just focus on Saika and Kamachi, 'cause Yukino and Yui don't deserve you. Not as they are right now, anyway. Sorry, this one was longer and more ranty, but I thank you very much for your time. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.